decided that what I really ought to do is to begin today with a very short intellectual autobiography so that you know where this stuff is coming from. When I was on my mission, and even before that time, I was very fascinated with archaeology, particularly with Mesoamerica. I had read some of the LDS scholars who had correlated things in the Book of Mormon to things in history, in particular in Mesoamerica, and I believed it. So on my mission, I'm telling everybody, and I had one advantage when I got back from my mission that I had not had before. I went to Spain, and when I was in Spain, oddly enough, I learned Spanish. It just so happens that a very large number of the documents that come out of Mesoamerica are written by Spanish-speaking people. And so knowing that I actually had the language to be able to read some of the documents in their original, I decided that it was my duty to read some of them, so that when someone says to me, for instance, this particular question that I was really interested in, when you tell me that that the Book of Mormon talks about Jesus Christ coming to the Americas, and you say that that's related to the Aztec Great White God, I can say to them, yes, I know that's true because I've read it. I thought this was a good idea. And so I started reading the information, and I read every LDS author on the subject. I read every document I could find on the subject. I eventually became addicted to the subject and probably spent way too long on it. Although it did foster my love for the anthropology and ethnohistory of that area of the world and kind of took me in a completely different direction. But the end result of that particular study was that I found out that what we as LDS had written on that topic was simply wrong. We just got it wrong. And that from the documentary evidence, there was no way that I could say that the legendary information from Quetzalcoatl had anything at all to do with the appearance of Jesus Christ in the Book of Mormon. Now, I published an article on that, and thereafter became probably one of the darlings of the anti-Mormon community. In fact, I suspect that I'm probably one of the most often quoted pro-Mormons that is favorably cited in anti-Mormon literature, because I wrote this article. And it just so happens that if you look at the comments about the various things that I've written and talked about, it turns out that at that particular point in my life, I was probably very open-minded, quite intellectual, very astute, and very logical, because I looked at the evidence and found out it didn't support something that was supposed to support the Book of Mormon. Now, since that time, I've looked at the Book of Mormon and I've compared it to Mesoamerica, and I've found all kinds of reasons why I believe that the Book of Mormon took place in that area of the world. I have gone from darling to dunce. All of a sudden, everything that I used to know that made me so good when I talked about Quetzalcoatl, all of a sudden seems to have flown out the window, and I really know absolutely nothing at all what I'm talking about, and certainly my methodology must have changed dramatically. This is all a surprise to me because it hasn't. In part of the time that I've spent learning about Mesoamerican topics, I have probably spent as much time complaining about the quality of the correlations that we as LDS have made to a particular area of the world as I've ever done doing anything else, but nobody really is interested in hearing that. I had at one point in time decided that I was destined to be the curmudgeon in the LDS community, and my sole function would be to try to keep other people on the right track by telling them when they'd gone off. I was reasonably certain from looking at all of the materials that had been published through probably the 1970s that the typical way that the LDS would approach Mesoamerica is to go through and say, if this is a pretty ruin, it was Nephite. If it's an ugly ruin, it was Lamanite. You will find wonderful pictures, gorgeous photographs of Palenque, which are way too late and have absolutely nothing to do with the Book of Mormon. When you get to the places the Book of Mormon probably took place, you will find out that they're really ugly. It turns out they're really probably backwards. But the fact is that they're there. Now, what we'd like to do is spend some time talking about the New World, the kind of information that's out there, and why the information that's there is starting to tell us more about the Book of Mormon. Now, I do have to kind of give you one other little piece of background. This is a very strange kind of thing for me because I've been forced into this position. My interest in the Book of Mormon is to explain it. I love the Book of Mormon. I want to learn more about it. I want to learn what it's telling me. I want to learn what the people think. I want to learn how they act. I want to learn why they did the things that they did. I really want to comprehend them. I already believe. I really don't need to prove it to myself. Been there, done that, had the inspiration that tells me, even when I didn't have some of the rest of the information that I've got, that this is a true book. That isn't what people want to hear. Mormons want to hear proof of the Book of Mormon. So anytime I've ever said anything about it, the basic question has been, well, you know, how can you prove the Book of Mormon? How can you show me that it's true? We're going to try and talk a little bit about that. Now, there's a paper being passed around. Most of what I'd like to do today is talk about bits and pieces that are on there, but I want to tell you why you've got the whole list. You have the whole list because it's absolutely impossible for me in a 40-minute presentation to talk about everything that's on there. But everything that's on there makes a difference. And here's the reason that it makes a difference. What we are looking at when we're trying to find a way to explain the Book of Mormon is we're trying to find a methodological process that's going to help us to understand when we have actually found something that makes sense, as opposed to the time when we're simply making wishful guesses. And we have made a lot of wishful guesses in the past. We need to know the difference between the two of them. One of the problems we've had in the way we present information is that we'll create something that's called a parallel. And we'll say, okay, there's a piece of information in the old world, there's a piece of information in the new world. Those two things are parallel, therefore there must be some connection. That isn't enough. One of the wonderful parallels that I remembered was that in the old world they had adobe bricks, and in the new world they have adobe bricks. Okay, that's true. Sun-dried mud is probably something that can come about by independent invention. I really don't see a lot of reason why someone has to import the idea of making something out of sun-dried mud. It's going to happen. People are going to understand that. They're going to find it. The fact that those two things are parallel is virtually meaningless. The other problem with parallels is that when you create a parallel, very frequently you will make the thing that you're talking about appear to be more parallel than it really is, simply by the way that you state it. And in going through some of the material on Quetzalcoatl and knowing the legends behind it, I would look at people putting the parallels down, and I'd look at them and I said, well, yeah, if you just read that, that's really parallel. But if you actually talk about what the information is that lies behind the way they said it, it doesn't say that. And the parallel really isn't there. So parallels are really not going to help us, but there is something that does. And the problem is we need a vocabulary to do it. And what I'm going to do is borrow a vocabulary term that William Deaver, an archaeologist working in the Bible, in the Old World Israel, that he came up with to try to solve the same kind of riddle. To be able to say there is something that helps us create a point of evidence that is better than a parallel, even though it seems to be similar. There, we got it. He calls it a convergence. So rather than a parallel, we're going to talk about a convergence. His comment: whenever the two sources or witnesses, and in this case he's talking about text and archaeology, happen to converge in their testimony, a historical datum or given may be said to have been established beyond reasonable doubt. To ignore or deny the implications of such convergent testimony is irresponsible scholarship, since it impeaches the testimony of one witness without reasonable cause by suppressing other vital evidence. Now, what he's talking about in that case is the text of the Bible and the dirt archaeology to which it's being compared. Now, the difference is when he is creating a convergence rather than a parallel, he is taking a large quantity of material and he's saying, here are things that come together in a similar description. And we have to have location, we have to have time, we have to have the content of the information. And in essence, what he's saying is the more pieces of information that interrelate with each other and all depend upon the same location, same place, same time, same people, same concept, the more of those you get, the more you are converging the two types of testimonies of information, and the more chance then you have that one of these datums is now going to be something you can establish. So that's what we want to talk about.